Coming up on this week's A Lively Experiment, the AG says the healthcare crisis is on the state's doorstep and offers some suggestions about what to do. And who may be running for governor next year on the Democratic side.
A Lively Experiment is generously underwritten by...
Hi, I'm John Hazen White Jr. For over 30 years, A Lively Experiment has provided insight and analysis of the political issues that face Rhode Islanders. I'm a proud supporter of this great program and Rhode Island PBS.
Joining us on the panel, veteran reporter and political contributor Scott MacKay, Republican strategist Lisa Pelosi, and political contributor Don Roach. And welcome to our latest Lively. I'm Jim Hummel, and it's great to have you with us this week. We've talked a lot over the past several months right here about the looming healthcare crisis in Rhode Island. The reality is it's a problem that has been decades in the making with no quick fixes. Attorney General Peter Neronha held a lengthy news conference on Wednesday with 8 proposals for the short run and the long term. Scotty, seems like we've been talking and writing about this for a very long time. Some of it's going after Big Pharma. The key piece to me is raising the Medicaid rates, to a legislature that can't find 2 nickels to rub together all of a sudden, right?
Well, that's going to be a real problem. I mean, let's face it, as you just said, we're looking at deficits. We got a structural deficit, of course, which hasn't really been, planed down. And it's still there, and I just don't think there's any real easy fix to this, particularly with the primary care shortage. It seems to me that when you see a lot of students in med school get themselves into debt, and then they go into specialties where they can make more money. You come out of med school owing $100,000, $200,000. Being a primary care doctor means you're going to be in hock for like 20 years before you pay it off.
And a lot of people, my daughter's roommate in college was a pre-med, her dad was a doctor, and she just said, I don't want to do the slog anymore, and she became a PA.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, my wife, the doctor, basically says if you call a plumber on a Saturday, he or she is making more money per hour than your pediatrician.
Yeah, it's wild. Lisa?
The bottom line is we have a state budget that's close to $14 billion. And how many times do we hear the politicians say that the budget is always about priorities? This is a priority, so you can't tell me that you can't find the money in this budget. It doesn't always have to be the extra money that comes in. They have to go back to the original budget and say, where can we find this money? And I don't think they want to take that time to do that. But
2%, 3%, 4%, that's a lot of money.
It is, but again, it's a priority for the state, so let's fund it. Let's find the funding for it, and the money's there. They just have to go into the budget and say, instead of funding this, we need to put the money toward primary care docs.
Peter Neronha.
Yeah, I think the AG is shedding a light on a problem that he's, raised throughout his tenure. But I think for me, it's a problem that I feel like the McKe administration and our General Assembly haven't really been focused on. And when you have places like Anchor Medical leaving and 25,000 Rhode Islanders are without health care, and I think maybe the number overall is 100,000 Rhode Islanders without a primary care physician, you just think of the long-term impacts to the cost of the state to care for those people eventually. And you think about some of the initiatives, it feels just like common sense to do. And so I always feel like if it's a common sense solution, Rhode Island won't do it.
Well, I think you have to look at who's paying these bills. If you look at the Rhode Island population that uses hospitals, you'll find that probably 70% with Medicare, Medicaid, the nursing homes, and the VA, it's got to be 70% of people, or very close to it, I think, at most hospitals, are on some kind of taxpayer-subsidized insurance.
And those are the low rates. You wonder if it was flipped, and it never would be, but if it was 70% private insurance, even though that the private insurance is paying a little bit less than mass, it would make a big difference. It's just that so many are on that public money that's at a lower rate.
That's true, and a lot of these folks are working. I think the worst thing that happens is the way that these big box retailers and fast food joints, that they don't offer health insurance to their employees. Their employees don't work enough hours, but the taxpayer subsidizes their health care because they end up on Medicaid.
Yeah. Let me just say a little advice to Peter Nerona, not that he needs it from me. He held a press conference the other day. He went on and on about a variety of things. Then he had like a handful of staffers come up before they even answered questions. Everybody was like zoned out. Maybe that was a filibuster so the reporters wouldn't answer questions. And he's good with the media. So if he's going to run for governor, maybe he should take that to heart.
Yeah, I think he needs a little advice if he's going to run for governor. And I think, when his press conference happened on Wednesday, I was kind of scratching my head thinking, this is kind of out of the wheelhouse for an attorney general for me saying as much as he was saying, putting his foot into healthcare and introducing the package so late in the session. I'm thinking, why are you doing this? And then now we know he's setting himself up to run for governor.
Yeah, and he said, so let's talk about that. The race is still a ways off. You have Dan McKe just late yesterday, a poll came out showing him, it's a UNH poll, at 19% approval. And that's double digits below what it was before. Were you surprised that it was that low?
Maybe surprised that it was that high, to be honest with you. I mean, I think the McKe administration has just not done a really good job, to put it mildly. And so I feel like Rhode Islanders have zero trust, and why should they have in the McKe administration? So I wasn't surprised at all.
You know the UNH people.
Yes, I do. And Andy Smith is a very good pollster, Professor Smith. He's worked for the Boston Globe, for the Providence Journal, for the Public's Radio. In fact, we worked with him on the Public's Radio, and he's excellent. This seems to me a little low, frankly. Sometimes a poll can be an outlier, as we all know. However, it looks like this will encourage people, perhaps Nerona, certainly Joe Shekarchi, who has a ton of money. He's sitting on several $1 million, and he would love to run, as we all know. And Helena Folks is already out there. She's moving her feet and raising money and doing the things that you have to do to prepare to run again. And she, as you know, she came very close last time.
Yeah, Helena Folks is doing a lot of fundraising, and I know she was late out of the blocks. Remember, they said she was kind of, if she had another month, maybe she would have done better. I find it interesting. Nerona was talking a little bit maybe about Lieutenant Governor. He's ruled that out. So I think it's either going to be governor or nothing at this point, but they're going to be eyeing those poll numbers carefully over the next 6 months.
And I think we've got to be watching McKe right now. I can understand why he's out there saying he's running again, because he's trying to finish this General Assembly session, and you don't want to be a lame duck trying to negotiate with the House and Senate when you're saying you're not going to run again. So you have that. And the other thing you need to be looking at is his fundraising. She has, I think, double what he has right now, and then Shekarchi has like double of what? Or
everybody
putting it together.
Shekarchi has more money than most people who
even
are U.S.
senators.
Yeah. Exactly. And so he's relentless. He's out there all the time.
I know we're a year out. Do you think there's a chance that, and things change, do you think there's a chance McKe will just say he's in his mid-70s, he's had a career of public service, to just say, I'm done?
Sure. I don't know how many times, and we go back a long way, and so do you, that the person who looks like they're the leader and they're measuring the drapes, in the State House for the governor's office 2 years out, they're not the person who ends up being governor, and that's gone on forever.
What do you think?
Yeah, and I'm just still stuck on what has McKe really accomplished. And when you think about things that are really important to Rhode Islanders, just the bridge debacle that continues.
Still no day of reckoning.
Exactly.
We still don't have a contractor, although I do hear within the next couple of weeks, in June, we're going to be hearing who gets the contract.
For me, I'm hoping it's not like, Joe Biden light for the Democrats with McKe at some point, but I hope that he's not the Democratic candidate for governor, because I think the Democrats can do better.
Republicans have traditionally done great in the governor's office. You worked for one of them, but not recently, and you wonder who's on the bench who would want to step up.
And we were talking about it, just a few minutes ago before we started, and we don't have any names that are coming forward right now. I don't see Dan McKe running again. I think there's a voter fatigue that happen. We see them when someone's been in office for a number of years. And I think there's a governor's fatigue too. Like, you're doing the 4th of July parade for the 7th time, and you're just kind of like, okay, I have to go do this again. There's still other things coming down the pike. You just said about the Washington Bridge. It's been kind of quiet for the past number of weeks. But I think when that number comes out of how much it's going to cost for the bridge to be rebuilt or built, it's just going to be raising the whole issues again. I don't see why Dan McKe wants to run again.
Right.
So I do think on the Republican side, and we were talking about this earlier before the show, I'm going to say I feel like Alan Fung is a great candidate, but he just has to run a different campaign.
Right.
Like, Alan Fung is a
But would he do it a third time?
He might not do it a third time, but Alan Fung was a great mayor for the city of Cranston, did a lot of great things for the city. He was a regular guy, talked to people out there, was saying, here's what I'm doing. He raised property taxes, but sent a letter to the people saying, here's why I'm raising it. And he put the city in a good financial shape. If he takes that same approach to the state of Rhode Island, he can win. But he cannot be linked to any of the national politics.
Well, isn't that the problem? That's what happened in the Seth Magaziner race, right? Magaziner, if he's being totally honest, his staff, on election day, they didn't think they were going to win. They really thought the Republicans were going to take it, and then it just didn't materialize. The red wave across the country didn't materialize.
Yeah, they had a very good turnout operation, and I think good campaign work. I mean, George Nee's daughter, as you know, Katie Nee, did a fabulous job as the campaign manager there for Magaziner, and I think a lot of people will tell you that had folks had her as her campaign manager, she might have actually done better because she came pretty close to McKe, I think because of her debate performance, and her television was very good.
Right, and a lot of money.
Yes, of course. That money, it's like the mother's milk of politics is the old joke. But I think Mr. Roach has a real, you hit something about Fung. I think had Fung run for governor last time, rather than run for Congress, that after the Democratic primary, the party was split in half, that he might have actually won that race.
Yeah, woulda, coulda, shoulda. If you've been paying attention to Providence recently, or you're a Providence resident, you know the city is in financial distress, to say the least. There was a court decision last year. They have to put a lot more money into the schools. So now they're scrambling, Lisa, to see where the money's going to come from, and they've talked about exceeding the cap, and that's at the General Assembly right now. But also out of left field comes this: we want to put a surcharge on all tickets at venues over 800 people.
And then they say it's only $2 a ticket, right? Well, when you're looking at a whole package, especially if people are coming from out of state, it's the taxes that we put on the hotels. It's the taxes that we put on the restaurants. Then we're going to put tax on the event. And
it's almost as much as the base price.
Yeah, so all of a sudden it starts to add up. So I think, again, this coming in late in the session, and it's not just for the city of Providence, that other venues outside of Providence could be looked at, like the University of Rhode Island for their events. So this, and Pawtucket with the stadium, and other places too. So there's going to be pushback. So I don't see that happening. I don't see that $2 per ticket event happening this session.
Yeah, like high school football games could also
Cranston
be taxed.
Stadium.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. It just
no, it's not a mandate, but they could do it. And
right.
Hey, schools are strapped for money, right?
Yeah, it just to me speaks of not really having a vision or a plan to solve like structural problems, and then also with just we got to bring business to Providence, the state in general. But to me, I feel like that needs to be the focus, and stop putting such burden on just regular, everyday taxpayers. It seems completely unfair and without vision.
Scotty?
Yeah, the tax cap at 4%, they're not the only ones busting it. If you look, Warren, Block Island, Middletown, there are other communities that are doing this. But in Providence, I still think you have to look at what, and this is one of Buddy Cianci's legacies, is the pension system. And that's a serious problem. I mean, it was almost one thing Link Chafee was right about when Governor Raimondo, then Governor Raimondo, or Treasurer Raimondo, decided to go after the state pension problem. Well, that was an easy kind of low-hanging fruit. It wasn't really all that bad off. But the locals were awful. And you look around some of these local, particularly police and
Warwick's
fire.
in tough shape.
Warwick's in tough shape. West Warwick, you have Providence. I mean, when Buddy came in, it was like 59% the second time.
Yeah.
When he came in, it was 59%, I believe, funded. And then when he left, it was something like 19 or 20. It's just...
I think the problem with Providence is that they say, Mayor Smiley says this is a one-time, let us exceed it 7-8% one time, but that he's got to come up with that 17 million every year. So where are they going to go next year? Now, he is talking about some trimming and cuts, and he says if we don't do this, we're going to have to do this. But you always hear the revenue first and not the cutting.
Right. So I think right now it's maybe a Band-Aid, just to get them through the next year, to figure it out. But I do see the General Assembly approving it.
You mean the $2?
Not the $2.
The cap.
The cap. I see them doing that. I mean,
think probably.
When you have the mayor and the whole city council asking for it, why would the General Assembly say no?
Yeah. Besides the budget, anything you have your eye on as we head down the stretch at the General Assembly?
It's very rare that Pat Crowley and myself find ourselves on
Wait a
the
minute.
same side
Stop the presses.
of an issue.
Really?
But
Pat Crowley, who's the head, he succeeded Jordan Nee as AFL-CIO. Right?
Yeah, I am for this 3% tax on those making over $625,000 because I really do think the state does need an infusion of cash, and this would estimate around $190 million for the budget. And I just feel like on lower income taxpayers, they're going to feel the burden much more than some of our higher income workers. And I feel like it will be something good for the state.
Counterpoint?
Yeah, I think Don, usually I agree with you. I think I'm going to have to push back on a couple of reasons for this. One, because I think it's counterintuitive that we're trying to keep primary docs in the state of Rhode Island, but then we're going to raise their income tax. So that's one thing. And we want to keep companies like Hasbro or attract companies like Hasbro to the state, and then we're going to raise the income tax. So I almost see it to be counterintuitive to what we want to be doing to move the state forward.
Yeah, but where are they going to go? Massachusetts, where they have the millionaire's tax, which has brought in, by the way, a ton of money.
Florida.
Like $2.6
We're
billion.
not in Massachusetts.
They moved to Florida. John Hazen White Jr. and Alan Hassenfeld are Florida residents. And I've said this many times. Yeah. And they take their money with them. They vote with their feet because they can do that.
The very wealthy. But the fact is that in Massachusetts, why is Massachusetts bringing in so much money, like $2.6 billion, way more than they thought they would get from their millionaire income tax?
But if you go with that, Don, so let's say they do that this year, so then what do you do next year when the budget gets even worse? And you're not looking, again, at the cutting side. If they cut 2 or 3 or 4% first and told all the department directors, you got to do it. There's no question. You got to do it. Pull a Trump. It's going to be consequences, right? And then all of a sudden, corrections is over by $50 million. Well, that's the way it goes. If you did that and said we're still in the hole, let's raise money, I'd feel better about that as a taxpayer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that this is the end-all, be-all. It's more of a Band-Aid. But again, this is why I say with the McKe administration, they haven't really done anything because there's not a vision or overall plan. I do think you have to make cuts in several areas within different departments in the budget. But in lieu of that, if we don't do this, then it's going to fall on the regular working class person who can't afford a 3% potential increase. Like the property tax increase for Providence is going to hit those people whose houses have risen in price a lot and their salaries haven't. So for me, I feel like we've got to share the burden, or to use a phrase that one of the $2 tax increase General Assembly folks said, we've got to diversify our revenue streams.
One of the big problems, though, I have to jump in right here, is that the federal government, I mean, who knows, it's so unpredictable what's going on in
every
Washington.
day.
But nonetheless, as far as health care goes and some other things, they're not going to be giving us the kind of Medicaid money and Medicare money that people are used to. And
so the gap widens.
Yes, a lot of people think Medicaid is all kids. Well, children, poor children, are cheap to cover. The big money that costs a lot of money in Medicaid is about 65, 70% of it goes to nursing homes for older folks.
Right.
And that's going to be a real problem. One of the problems with government at every level is that politicians are really reluctant to make that tough decision that we're not going to do this anymore. And we're not going to have this program. We're not going to do it because once you do something, there's a clientele in it. You know, do you want to come off summer basketball? It doesn't cost that much. And people keep going on. And once a billion here, a billion there, a million here, a million there. It adds up. But I think that you've got a point. And Jim has a point too, that we always hear why we need more money, and we don't have people saying, okay, I think we're going to freeze hiring. I think we're going to do some things that travel. I mean, there's some easy things you can do.
The budget's up 40%, Scotty. It's unsustainable. Where are we going to be 2, 3, 4 years out? The out years.
You can't do that.
You know, it's been funny. We've been hearing over and over, we don't have a spending problem. What is it?
We don't have a revenue problem. It's a spending problem. That's what we say.
Yeah, and I remember, do you remember John Robitaille when he ran for governor back in, 2010?
Mm-hmm.
He was
with
saying
Link
that.
Chafee and Ken Block and Frank Caprio.
Yeah, so imagine if we really looked at the budget back then and really, determined is all the money being spent the way it should be, where would we be today?
I did a story on the General Assembly spending, just the Assembly itself, and they were like $50 million at the time. And I did an analysis on the state budget, and at that time, this was before COVID, it went up about $1 billion every 4 years. Not simultaneously with each governor, but about that time period. And if you think about that, that seemed unsustainable. And then the COVID money came in, and I thought, we talked about this last week, I thought once the COVID money flushed out, then the budget would go back to 11 or 12 billion. We're at $14 billion.
Well, one of the things that I can't quite figure out is the schools. As we know, schools are a huge, for every municipality in the state, schools are their number one cost. And this certain thing with state aid, if they don't have that, it's going to be serious problem because that hits the local property taxpayer that you were talking about, Don.
And they write in, they've eliminated the car tax. Give them props at that. You remember some governors went after that, right?
That's right.
Suspended it.
Yep.
So that's written in every year, and that's a big line item.
There hasn't been a broad-based tax increase in Rhode Island since the Sunland administration, after the credit union crisis.
They always say that, Scotty, and then Gina Raimondo tries to double the amount to go to Musquamacket. All we have is the beach. What are you doing? They nickel and dime you to death on the fees.
Right. And then they muddle through on the budget.
Right. No broad-based. They take the tobacco money. All of a sudden, the revenue looks a little bit better, but nobody's looking at the long term.
Yeah.
What else down the stretch in the General Assembly?
I got to bring up RIPA.
Sure.
Just
RIPA.
Because it's an issue that really impacts people trying to get to work. And we want people to work in Rhode Island. So we need to figure this out. And I think they wanted to move some of the gas tax money. And then the DOT said, no, you can't move money out of the DOT, to RIPA for this. What I can't understand is why can't we put people in the room and let's just get this figured out? This is such an important issue.
Somebody had a suggestion to take out a bond for operating expenses. The one thing that Link Chafee did that was right was to start pay as you go. Because remember we used to take out bonds for transportation stuff?
Yeah.
So then what happens when the bond money runs out? You can't do that.
That's not
you got to get to the root of the problem.
Actually, her guy, Allman, was the first guy to start really talking about that. To do
Take it off the credit card.
The pay-go, because it's,
What about RIPTA? It's just been, dare I say, the phrase that I hate, the redheaded stepchild. But it has been over the years. Nobody knows what to do about it.
Exactly. And I think because the top folks don't take RIPTA in a lot of respects, that it doesn't get the light shined on it, and it doesn't have the support that it should have. And I hate to say that, but it's always kind of been that way.
Yeah, that's true.
Any thoughts on RIPTA?
Thinking about RIPTA, I just think about just in general in Rhode Island. I said this earlier. If it makes common sense, we don't do it in Rhode Island. And so with RIPTA, we've been trying to figure this out for decades. And I don't think we have the overall infrastructure of what what does public transportation, what should it look like in Rhode Island? Where should the hubs be?
Yeah.
Where are businesses that want to bring in people from the other communities, like Boston? You know, many people commute to Boston. I commuted to Boston for 20 years. And so we don't have that kind of thought process in Rhode Island. And I think until we make RIPA like a real service, then we'll just continue to see what we've been seeing.
Scotty, it's a full Rhode Island.
It is.
You take RIPTA to go to your primary doctor, and he's not there. All right, we only have a couple of minutes left. Let's go to outrage. You want to finish the thought on that?
Yeah, quickly. I mean, one of the things about Rhode Island, I think, is one of the biggest shibboleths there is that if so small we can put everybody in one room and solve the problems.
Exactly.
Right.
But the problem is they all hate each other once you put them in that room.
Outrage or kudo this week? What do you have?
Outrage. I really think that what's happening at the national administration with President Trump and his minions is going after universities. They're a real strength. And you look at how many jobs Harvard and Brown and these, universities and the research, this helps everyone. I mean, open heart surgery was pretty much developed at Harvard Medical School and Mass General, and I just don't understand. Obviously, he's made it personal. There's something he doesn't like. The Pritzker family, he supposedly hates them. They did a hotel deal years ago and didn't work, so he's mad at Penny Pritzker.
All right. What do you have this week? Outrage or kudo?
I have an outrage.
Go ahead.
Potholes.
No?
I am just, it's almost June, right? So we've gone through the winter, and there are places where I drive that I have to memorize the road. Oh, there's a pothole coming up, so make sure that you swerve over here. And it's not just the roads, it's the shopping centers, too. So I don't know if you've been in shopping centers. I mean, there's some craters in there that you have to watch
family of
out.
4 living in your nearest pothole.
Yeah, so we talk so much about bridges, we should move to the roads, too.
All right, that's good. Don, what do you have? You have the last minute.
So I have a kudos, and it's to the people who work at Pathways in Warwick, where my son has attended for about 6 years. He graduated last week.
Saw that.
And so people who kind of serve people who have special needs, this is just a kudos to you. Thank you for everything that you do. And people like me, parents of children who have special needs, just want to say thank you.
They're doing God's work, are they
Yeah.
not? Yeah, and you can imagine, and a lot of times we've seen this with daycare and others, they're the most underpaid and underappreciated. So
Yep.
I appreciate
Right.
you bringing that out. 6 years, that's amazing.
Yep.
That's good. Okay, folks, it is a quick 30 minutes. Thank you for joining us. Don, great to see you, and Scott and Lisa. If you can't catch us Friday at 7 or Sunday at noon, we archive all of our shows at ripbs.org/lively. Also, check us out on the station's YouTube channel. That's RIPBS. Just go to YouTube and you can look for Lively there. We're also on Facebook and Twitter, and wherever you get your favorite podcasts, take that along with you. We really are heading into the heart of the legislative session. We will know a lot more next week and in the following week. So come back here for a full recap of the week's events and analysis from our stellar panel next week as a Lively experiment continues. We hope you have a great weekend.
A Lively Experiment is generously underwritten by
Hi, I'm John Hazen White Jr. For over 30 years, A Lively Experiment has provided insight and analysis of the political issues that face Rhode Islanders. I'm a proud supporter of this great program and Rhode Island PBS.